So first of all, I want to apologize for the quality of this video. I do not do film tutorials and I don't really film anything, so I'm just doing this on my mobile phone, but hopefully it's going to be enough for you to get the gist of how I did this. So it's a quick walkthrough of how to make feathers rather, out of fake fur. And it's the process that I used for my Yzma costume from the Emperor's New Groove. So this is how the massive feather that goes on her hat turned out, and this is how the collar turned out as well. I did this because you simply do not get feathers of this size and shape, and then I decided to make the collar out of the same process as well, so that they matched rather than having a fake feather and then real feathers on the collar. You could definitely use real feathers on the collar, though. You can get feathers of that size quite easily. So yeah. Thank you to Lady Shinjuku Cosplay, aka Jessie, because she was the one who taught me how to do this. So a couple of things you're going to need. Well, the things that you absolutely need are fake fur, hot glue, and iridescent paint, which I'll talk about a bit more later. Optional things that can help: pipe cleaners, as you see, wire, and sorry about the pile of coppers in the corner there, but wire, and that's some chicken wire as well, and I'll explain where they came in useful later. Warbler can also be a useful thing, which I will explain a bit as we go along. So obviously you want to start out with your fake fur, and you want to pick the color that you obviously want the costume to be. If you're not going for like a really solid white or black, getting this sort of fabric that has a tone in it is going to help you create a more authentic feathery look. If you look at feathers, particularly not black or not pure white, they usually are sort of varied in colour, particularly dependent on when the light shines on them. So starting out with a fabric like this, so this is a base purple with white through it, is going to help you create a more realistic feather in the end. However, if you are just doing like a plain black, don't worry, there are ways to fix it. That is what the iridescent paint is for. But yeah, if you can get a fabric that has sort of different color tones to it, that would be great. This was actually a sample that I got through when making Yzma that I then decided not to use. But this one, it's sort of a grey and navy blue blending together, and this one is very, very much a pink, a lilac rather, with pink flecks through it. So what you need to do is obviously to make a template of your feather shape, the size that you want, and then you need to cut that template in half, and you then want to cut your feathers out from that template. Now, the one thing you need to be careful of is to cut it the right way. So your feather, to create the right effect, you want the pile of the fabric, so the way the fabric is laying, the direction of the fur, to go out from the middle of the fabric. So you need to cut one half so that the fabric is going this way, and then turn it round and cut the other half so the fabric is going that way. That way, when you join the two together, you have the feathers looking like they're growing out from the middle. So you can see here, this half, the fabric lies flat that way, and this half, the pile of the fabric, is going that way. The next thing you want to do, obviously, is glue them together. Now, this is where you can maybe use wire or maybe use Warbler, depending on what you need to do with the feathers. So with these particular ones for Yzma, this tucks into the hat, and it has to stand upright, and it had to maintain that sort of curled shape that actually needs rebent now that I look at it. And these ones needed to maintain that sort of erect shape around the collar. So in order to do that, what I actually did was cut out some chicken wire. You can actually see a bit of the chicken wire sticking out the sides there because they just tuck into the hat and you can't see it there. And basically I laid my fabric and I glued it to the chicken wire and then glued it another layer on the other side. So basically the chicken wire is sandwiched in between the fabric, which is now tangled there. And yeah, so you've then basically got a feather that's really, really moldable. With Yzma's hat, I've actually had to reinforce that with some copper, with some of that really strong wire up the back, because the chicken wire itself was not enough to hold the weight of the fur. Then to create the middle stock, I just used pipe cleaners, good old-fashioned pipe cleaners in the right sort of colouring as well, and stuck them up the middle, basically to cover the sort of the join where the two layers, where the two parts of fabric sort of meet. Now, if you don't need your feathers to sort of maintain shapes like these two here, if you just need them to sort of lie like normal feathers do and not hold these dramatic over the top bends, what you can do is, rather than using pipe cleaners, you can, or something else, you can use bits of warbler. So if you get very thin warbler and sort of roll it up into a thin stalk, you can then use that as the center bone. Not only will it look a little bit more natural than the pipe cleaners did, but also that in itself will lend a strength to the feather. So it'll be just enough to sort of hold it flat and stop it flopping about, but won't be as heavy, because this is actually quite heavy really for something that sticks on your head. So the warbler won't be as heavy as using the wire. However, it's not going to allow you to be so moldable. I mean, I can roll this right up or stretch it out. So you've got to work out really what's going to be best for your feathers. Jessie used the warbler one and it looked really effective and really natural, just a thin sort of roll of warbler that was then painted black to match her black feathers. But for me, I needed that flexibility, so the wire was definitely a good call with the pipe cleaners in the middle. I probably could have used something more, you know, not pipe cleanery, but I ran out of ideas and I got that done. So that's how you make your basic feather. Hot glue, fur. The main thing is to make sure the fur is that you do the fur so it's going in both directions. The pain of that can be that you can end up buying quite a lot of fur for not a lot of fabric, because when you buy fake fur, generally your selvage is as there and your fur is going down that way. So if you're wanting to cut along, it can mean that in order to be able to cut along, you end up having to buy a lot of fabric. But, well, that's what cosplay is, isn't it? And the other tip, when you're cutting out your fabric, you don't want to attack this with a pair of scissors. You want to use, for lack of a better word, a scalpel, so like a cutting blade, so that you cut through the fabric here, the mesh, but you don't actually chop through the layers of fabric on the front. So if you chop the layers of fabric on the front, and these are before I learnt to work with fabric, you can see here that you get that really sharp edge. This is a different fabric that I used for something else. Sharp edge there, but if I turn it this way, this is actually quite a fluffy fabric, so it's not that difficult, but you can see it's got a very sharp, very defined edge here. Particularly if I do it like that, you can see where my scissors have been, and you can see down here, this is the end of the fabric, and rather than it sort of tailing off nicely, it's a really blunt edge. So that's because that was cut with scissors, and you can see there actually how just all those bits of, all the fibres are just sheared. If you use a scalpel, you can cut the fabric that makes the shape, but without cutting the fibres. So definitely use a scalpel for when cutting out your shapes. So yeah, that's your basic feathers. So either your four sections of fur, your front and your behind, your front and then your back, and you sandwich them all together. One's going that way, one going that way, one going that way, one going that way, with some supporting material like chicken wire in the middle, if you want to have sort of a shape that you can control, or just sandwiched together with a piece of warbler to make the spine, to give it a little bit of sort of strength so that they don't flop, but for less control, but a lighter finish as well. Now, the key thing that Jess explained to me, and which really makes a difference, is this. So this is iridescent paint. This particular stuff is Royal and Langnick Essentials Metal and Pearls acrylic paint. Really any sort of iridescent paint will do. So I got 2 tubs of this. So this one is iridescent blue and my other one was iridescent purple. The reason we use this, and this is what can fix the black feather problem, is to get that sheen that feathers have on the fabric. So you really want to do the dry brushing technique. So you're going to get your brush, put a little bit of paint out on the not on the feather, on a bit of paper or something, and just take a tiny little bit and start stroking it along. So you can see it worked particularly well on the blue fabric. As I move that around, you can see that it's sort of shimmering purple, the way that a feather might do. So because of my cartoon references, I used a purple shimmer on the blue and a blue shimmer on the purple. It definitely worked better on this darker fabric. You can see the shimmer really, as I move that about, you can see the purple shimmer coming through on the blue. It worked less well on this particular fabric, but you can kind of see that there's a blue shimmer there. I don't know whether I used too much on this particular type of fabric, or this was a very, very fluffy fabric, so maybe it just didn't quite work as well, but you can particularly see the effect that it gives. And what that does is, particularly if you're using something like a black feather, it really like a black fur, it really brings the fabric to life. Jess used green iridescent paint on her black feathers, and they looked absolutely divine. I'm sure if you're a better painter than I am, you would get a better job of that as well. And that really is the key to making them look like feathers rather than just fur stuck together. So yeah, that's really it. It's quite simple. So the main things to remember are remember to get your pile going the right way so that you have the growth from your spine in the middle of the feather. Remember, you will need to cut a back and a front, which does mean that the feathers will be thick. So you have to weigh that up and decide if it's the right project, if it's the right way of doing it for your project. Using a wire inside if you want to be able to create fancy shapes, or using Worbla or some sort of strengthening spine if not, because obviously feathers do not flop. Or at least normal feathers do not flop. Obviously ostrich feathers and that are a bit different. But and then using the dry brushed iridescent paints to create that shimmer. That's pretty much it. Don't burn yourself on the hot glue, as I did numerous times. I can't really say any more on that, but if you've got any questions, let me know.